Hi, it's Dr. Steve from Misericordia University. Welcome today to today's online class. Today, let's consider two student-centered methods that are growing in use in secondary education, particularly project-based learning and case studies. To begin, let's consider project-based learning. In project-based learning, students engage in some type of a project. So a project is a hands-on way of learning, and it normally takes place over a relatively long period of time. So we say relatively long. This may be a month-long activity or 6 weeks type of thing. A lot of it will be done outside of class, although some time in class could be devoted to preparing and sharing progress on the project. And ultimately, PBL, normally all projects share this other piece, which is the way they culminate. They normally culminate in some type of presentation for the class. So that can be a read out loud, an oral report, could be something that's written, or it could be some type of report, an oral presentation plus a written report. And normally, there's some type of an item like a multimedia presentation or a poster or a chart or a display, something that physically is created as one of the outcomes for PBL. As with many of the other student-centered methods, there are many benefits that have been noted by researchers to engaging in project-based learning in secondary education. They include benefits that deal with the social interaction and the cooperating of students working together. Students develop skills in writing, in verbal communication. It engages them in higher level thinking. It's an independent activity, so it tends to build self-esteem as students really prepare well in one particular area or topic, and they make a positive contribution on it and get to show what they have learned. And also, students get to exercise control over their learning. So student control over learning is always a positive thing and a motivating factor in learning as well. So many benefits can be derived from having your students engage in PBL. So what are some suggestions for teachers who would look to implement project-based learning in their classrooms? Well, first of all, you would want to provide a lot of assistance up front. Help students to select a topic and decide how they're going to work on that topic. Are they going to work individually and independently, or are you going to have or provide the option for small groups to work on a project together? I always feel that helping students select a topic rather than something that many of us have experienced throughout our K-12 experiences. A teacher will say, well, here's something we're going to do, so good luck finding a topic, and we'll check in with you in a month from now. I always feel it's a very good idea, and research suggests provide more help up front to the students. Could you provide some sample topics? Could you provide them with some suggested readings or websites or some other types of resources? Have you done this before? Could you ask students from a prior class if you could hold on to their project and share it with others in the future? Because remember that that's their copyrighted material. Fair use would say you have to ask students for the ability to use their materials and show it to others. But all of these could be good leads and helping aids in assisting to determine what kind of project will I do, what type of topic will I embark on. After students select a topic and determine if they're going to work in groups or individually, a lot of the teacher's responsibility has to do with helping and assisting and coaching the students along the way. In particular, you want to stay in touch with students and make sure that they remain on task. Set some deadlines. Ask for progress reports. Provide some coaching. provide some guidance. Make sure that you're available to answer questions and help them address or at least better understand problems that arise. And make sure that you help by maintaining balance. In other words, you want to guide and you want to coach, but you don't want to provide too much guidance and coaching so it then becomes teacher-centered again, because you want the students to really take the lead on this. So if you can find an appropriate balance along the way, would be very good. After students engage in a project and they've worked on it for a number of weeks, it would be a letdown to them if they didn't have an opportunity to report out to the class, to basically show off, in a sense, to share what they have done. All researchers find that a major part of the research process is not just the upfront and the personal research that goes into something, to a project, but also you have to disseminate that information. You have to share it with others. Think about doing asking them to do a written report of some type, like a paper that describes the experience and how they developed the project. So it won't necessarily have to be a traditional research paper, but maybe something more about the project itself, in addition to the oral report. Now, this is very helpful if you're going to have students or give students the option of working in groups to ensure that truly all members of the group were participating and getting something out of this process. Because students will invest a significant amount of time and energy in a project, make the project a significant part of the student's grade. Provide a clear rubric, and maybe consider adding some of these or including some of these criteria. The organization of the project. Look at not only the quantity, but also the quality of the project. Look at the quality of what they share with the class in their oral presentation. And maybe consider grading and assessing the quality of the products, because students may develop a brochure, poster, PowerPoint, other multimedia presentations, video, in addition to a written and an oral piece. So consider making it a significant part of the student's grade, and consider looking at some of those criteria as you do the grading and assessment. So let's take a moment and look at an example of a history-based project. As we saw with discovery, learning, and inquiry teaching, sometimes the teacher could take a more active role in defining that particular learning activity, or sometimes the teacher can let the students take a more active role in that, or even design the whole thing entirely on themselves. Same thing with project-based learning. Here's an activity called LOST, and this is provided free of charge by Buck Institute of Education, or BIE.org. And this is a great site, and they provide a lot of free project-based learning examples and resources for teachers at all grade levels. In the activity called LOST, here's the scenario. So this would be a situation where the teacher would say, okay, here is the defined project, and then students will work on this in teams. The scenario in LOST is that students in the groups are stranded on an island. They're isolated from the rest of the world. Now, it's their mission as part of this project is to create and design a civilization with group members, and a civilization that will withstand the test of time. So when you think about it, there's a lot to be considered in creating a civilization like that, because we have to look at not just physically how people are going to survive, but how about mentally and emotionally as well. Due to the nature of this scenario and this project, a whole lot is going to go into planning this civilization. So when you look at it, Students can really engage in any or all content areas in order to make this project a successful one. One thing that students will have to look at for sure is where are they located and what kinds of characteristics are needed for people to develop an advanced civilization and to survive there physically, given the characteristics of that particular geography. Other content areas would certainly be earth science. So you'd have to see what kind of environmental elements are there and which elements can the survivors can they take advantage of and capitalize on to add to their civilization. Mathematics would be involved because this is an isolated group. The group would have to create its own monetary system. We would have to look at a governmental system and a judicial system. Also, how are we going to keep people entertained? And how are people going to grow and recreate? So physical education could be involved. The arts could be involved as well. On Blackboard, I've provided two links. One is a link to this particular scenario, so you could examine it more, and another link directly to BIE.org, so you could consider all of the different project-based ideas and resources that they supply. Now let's turn our attention and focus on case studies. Case studies place students in a problem-solving scenario. In a case study, a real-world type of problem is presented to students along with data, and then students attempt to solve or address that particular problem. And one of the learnings coming out of this is that in real world situations, there normally are not black and white definitive answers, but rather everything's a trade-off. So if we try solution A, well, somebody's going to be hurt or something's going to be lacking. If we try solution B, the same thing will occur. Now, a case study may present actual data from a real situation that exists or has already occurred, or from a real company. But a case may also not present actual data, but simulated data. To address a case study, there are three basic steps. Students begin by analyzing the case, and then they determine possible courses of action that they could use to solve or address the problem or issue, and then finally they deliver a final product in which they present their best ideas of how to address the problem. When students address the case itself and analyze, they have to incorporate a lot of skills. For example, they have to determine what is actually known and assess how is this problem and how serious is it and what all does it entail. They have to sift through important and also unimportant details and determine what they have to focus on. And in the process, they may create charts, tables, and other types of material as needed to both help them analyze, and also some of these pieces can become part of their final product where they get to try to convince whatever audience they're going to present to, which would be the class and the teacher, but whoever that audience is in that scenario, in that case, try to convince them that this is the best choice to make. The first advantage of using a case study in your classroom is that it's a very active form of learning. It's a form of learning where students can truly get engaged and get really into this scenario. All the other advantages are really advantages that are life lessons, life skills that they get to build, that they truly will use in other places in their life. For example, they have to analyze information. They have to develop and test out different and hypothesize and test out different solutions or possible solutions to problems that we encounter in life. Students develop skills that allow them to think clearly in situations where it's ambiguous, it's unstructured, and they're going to use information to the best of their ability to try to deal with and address those situations. Students have to dig deeper to try to understand and decipher things, try to determine what's really going on, what are the causes of the different events that they're witnessing. Students have to deduce assumptions. They have to deduce principles because the cases are not explicit in exactly what are these underlying situations. Students have to listen and they have to talk, but they have to listen to others as well because cases are usually more complex, and really successful addressing of a case will be better done if there are more than one point of view to be listened to. And then in the process, students develop skills in articulating their ideas and also trying to influence and persuade others of what they have learned and what they believe to be correct assumptions about what they're seeing or good ideas of how to address the problems. Let's take a look quickly and briefly at 3 examples of case studies. Let's do one in math, one in literature, and one in science. For the math case study, let's look at 1 more minute between classes. The scenario is that the student council has asked the principal to add simply 1 more minute between classes. The idea is to cut down on the number of students who are late for class. So the problem is the principal has asked your class to study this matter and come up with a recommendation. On the surface, while adding 1 more minute between classes throughout the day does not sound like a very complex issue, as students investigate it more, it really is a lot more complex. Here are some guidelines provided by the principal in the scenario. Bus schedules cannot be changed because they are set by the school board. Classes must meet certain numbers of hours and certain numbers of minutes, so that cannot be changed. Homeroom time must be in there as well. A multimedia presentation is expected in 2 weeks, and the students are to defend any of their plans with facts, figures, and charts, and be ready to do a persuasive argument. Now, let's consider a second example, one in the area of science. The scenario or the case study is the effect of humans on their local watershed. We know that for people to survive, we need water, and there's limited amounts of water, of clean water for use on the earth. So the case here is that this community is locked in a debate about appropriate use of existing water supplies, and also at the same time the need to expand business development in their community. In the scenario, last month a local newspaper ran a story about not enough sources of water for the community. The article talked about unless additional sources of water can be located, this community will run out of clean water in 20 years. To add to the complexity of the case, today the local newspaper ran a story about a new industry who would like to come into the community. But this industry would require a large amount of water for its manufacturing process. Now, on the positive side, it's expected to add about 200 new jobs and support through taxes. Monetarily, it'll support the community and a lot of people getting jobs here. On the negative side, a lot of water would be required to invite this industry to come in. The bottom line here is local government is going to hold a public hearing in 2 weeks. Students are asked to research and to present their views at this hearing. Let's briefly consider one more example, one in the area of literature. Let's consider Beowulf. When high school students learn Beowulf, a lot of times it's confusing to the students because the verse form and the poetic techniques are unfamiliar to them, and they have a hard time understanding it. In this case study, students will be asked to compare several translations of Beowulf. But they're not going to consider the translation in terms of accuracy, but rather as an act of interpretive recreation. In this case, students will be provided several audio translations of a passage from Beowulf. Then students will be asked to make a list of how the translations differ and why those differences may exist. Students then in groups will compare the new translations of the passage with the original, the Old English. And then ultimately students will share their findings and discuss what it means to translate literary works and determine what types of decisions do translators have to make in this process. While teachers can create their own case studies, of course, increasingly we find the textbook companies are providing more access to case studies as part of their supplemental materials. And also we can find many resources online. This Beowulf case study was found on readthinkwrite.com. So I will provide a link to this on Blackboard. This particular website is a great place for literature teachers, English teachers, to locate all kinds of resources, including case studies. So do go online and search for case studies in your particular content area. Realize that when you find a case study, they are normally large, they're complex, they're robust, and a lot of things can be studied as part of one case, there's a lot of complexity in them. So think about what is the purpose of using that case with your students. What specifically do you want students to gain? What do you want them to do? If the case does not provide questions or tasks for the learners, then look at the case and present a series of tasks or questions for the learners to address in the case. And also consider how are you going to assess what the learners have done with this case and how they have what they have gained from analyzing this case. So as you can see, both project-based learning, PBL, and case studies are two interesting and very active types of learning situations that you can use in your classes potentially. To wrap up today's class, online, let's hold a brief discussion on project-based learning and case studies. I provided a series of questions to get our conversation started. Remember that you do not have to answer all of these questions in your posts, but rather the idea is to prompt the discussion to get started, and throughout the whole discussion maybe we will consider all of these questions as a group. I hope you enjoyed today's class, and I look forward to seeing you at our next virtual class.